All right, guys, so today we are going over the snatch again. Last time when we went over the snatch, we were going over like common mobility issues, things that go wrong for people that make it challenging for them to do the snatch, and then kind of frameworks for identifying where in general you are in terms of your snatch. So whether you have a strength or a technique limitation, and then we kind of went over the ways to address those things, some technical stuff that I'll give some of my clients, and then some general advice on how to get stronger. So in this episode, it's going to be a little bit more about like, you know how to snatch, and now we're looking at how we can stress the snatch in order to prepare you for competition. Okay. So the way I see it, there are a couple stress that we can apply to the snatch. The ways that we're looking at these are heavy singles. That can be like a hang snatch, a power snatch, a full snatch, any sort of like 1RM attempt related to the snatch. You've got heavy complexes, which show up often in competition. So that might be something like a build to a heavy snatch plus a hang snatch plus an overhead squat, all without putting the barbell down. We've got battery stuff, which is like heavy Isabel. Quarterfinal workouts have been done where it's like row and snatch like 18, 12, 9 or whatever with 185 pounds for guys and 125 for ladies. And then we've got cycling. So that's going to be stuff like Randy. A couple years ago, we had the chipper in the open that had, 95 pound power snatches at the end of it. So there's a bunch of different ways that the snatch appears in training and in competition, I should say. And so we want to identify how we can train for the different ways that the snatch shows up. For the most part, when we're looking at heavy singles, complexes, and battery work, the 1RM snatch is going to be the thing that correlates the highest. So we want to just make sure that we're getting strong and we are strong enough to just do the prescribed weights. So in general, when a heavy complex shows up in in a competition, oftentimes the scores that people are getting are highly predictive of their 1RM. So it's not super common that we see someone who can do a snatch complex or any barbell complex with like a significantly higher percentage of their 1RM compared to the rest of the field. So if we see a snatch complex show up, in general, most of the field will be getting near the same percentage of their 1RM. I would argue that in some cases, being more technical will allow you to kind of sneak away with a little bit more, but also being stronger will too, because you may potentially be able to just muscle your way through the reps. I still think in general, across the board, we're looking at kind of, a percentage being the most predictive thing for that. And so if we want to be really good at those, the complexes and competition, raising your 1RM will therefore raise that percent max, and then you will have a better score in that event. Repeated reps, so anything usually above 75% would be considered battery. That's just reps that you're going to do almost always in the form of singles. So these are weights that most people are opting to do singles, even the pros. And you even see this, like this number can be much lower compared to percent of 1RM, like in the quarterfinals. Most recently, as of recording this, 2026. So the 2026 quarterfinals, we had most of the elites doing singles on the clean and jerks during the workout, and that was at 135 and 95 pounds. For battery work, which is heavier singles that you have to do repeatedly, being stronger will be the primary thing that's going to make it easier for you to just do those reps. Now, in addition to that, I want to mention that 1RM is not the only thing indicative of being good at cycling a barbell for quick singles. Your fitness does matter for that. And this becomes obvious if we look at somebody who all things the same. One is an Olympic weightlifter and one is a CrossFitter. So, you're the same height, same weight, you have the same 1 RM. The CrossFitter is going to be able to do 30 for time at, I don't know, 80% of 1 RM, a lot faster than the Olympic weightlifter because they are just better conditioned. They'll be able to rely a little bit more on the glycolytic system to assist with the repeated contractions at or near 1 RM. Compared to someone who's just very strong and has very little what we would consider like conditioning or aerobic fitness. In that instance, it does make sense that we train specifically for battery. I would say that in that example, a heavy complex or just a heavy single of some variation of the snatch, the Olympic weightlifter will probably be pretty similar to the CrossFitter. If they're like 1 RMs are the same, I would say. But once we start to fold in some sort of like repeatability and aerobic stimulus involved with the heavy lifting, the CrossFitter will generally do better. And for that reason, it makes sense that we would train this, right? Because we want to, that's the thing that's going to show up in our sport. So here's a kind of flow chart on how we would develop battery. Practice alone, I would say, is not something that we necessarily need to work on too much with barbell battery and snatch battery. For this, it's more about just getting stronger. When we start to fold it in, we can add other components. We could do like 3 heavy power snatches, rest 40 seconds, 3 heavy power snatches, rest 40 seconds. But at that point, we're basically doing it with easy time constraints, right? And so after we've worked on getting strong, some of the progressions that we'll use are like practice with light general fatigue, practice with easy time constraints. And so light general fatigue, you can see the example there. Might be something like get on the bike, bike easy, and every couple of minutes get off and do like 1 tough rep, right? This exposes you to being a little bit out of breath, having a small amount of general fatigue on, within the system, but still going and producing like a high power output, successful rep. From there, you can just increase the levels of stress as you train more. So, we got light general fatigue with time constraints, practice with moderate general fatigue and time constraints, and then just practice with challenging general fatigue and time constraints. And then you can go up to like competition simulation, but in general, you can see the examples there and how they progressively become more challenging based on the things that are accompanying the battery work, and also like the amount of rest that you're getting and just general fatigue that is induced. For barbell cycling, generally what I like to think about, and I learned this from one of my coaches and mentors, Paul Weber, use as little energy as possible. Oftentimes we get into these like pigeonholes of like, the snatch is really technical, so I need to make sure that I'm fully set up, I'm like really wound up and tight, and I'm going to use as much energy. But if it's only 95 pounds and that barbell is only 40% of your 1 rep max, you don't need to be super tight. Like, you don't need to use more energy than what is required to execute the rep. And so as long as you're moving safely with generally good movement mechanics and you're completing the rep to the movement standard, relaxing a little bit is beneficial because it will afford you more energy in the long term. It makes you more efficient so that you can go and like do several reps in a row, right? The other thing that I want to mention is that when we start to incorporate barbell cycling, there are techniques that deviate from the ideal perfect technique that we might be striving for with just heavy lifting, right? And so, muscle snatching is one that we'll see, and then no contact snatches. So for the muscle snatch, if we're seeing like a 75 or even a 95 pound barbell at the CrossFit Games, they are likely going to muscle snatch it depending on the workout. And then no contact snatches are something they might still, rebend under back into their power position, but they're not making contact through the hip because it's a little bit faster for them to just bring the bar straight down past the body and then go straight back up overhead. And so those are things that you can practice when you are developing your barbell cycling and training. So when we're developing barbell cycling, this looks similar to the snatch battery work, but you can kind of see here The example workouts, practice alone is something that makes sense with this. So you might say like, I want I might tell a client just go and do 5 to 8 reps, keep it smooth, relaxed, as efficient as possible. Think about using as little energy as possible. And I only want you to do between 5 and 8 reps and then rest until you're ready to go again, right? Then we can start to add in some constraints. We can add in some general fatigue, like you can see here, and then just progressively make it more challenging. But what I would say is that I'm not moving on, and this is true for the battery stuff also. I'm not moving on until things feel like they're really good, but also like it's contextual to where I am in a training plan and like what's coming, from here. Like if I'm just doing an accumulation cycle, I don't need to like induce a ton of fatigue because the stuff can be really fatiguing. It can cause a big fatigue deficit that you have to overcome. It can take away energy from other training that might be a higher priority for you. So being tactful with like where to go to and then where to kind of hang out until you need to like push and tune things up within this framework is important. So here are some other things that are going to determine how barbell cycling looks in a workout. Overall duration of the workout will affect it. So doing a 40-minute workout with barbell work in it will require probably less barbell cycling than if you do, we're only going to do like a 4-minute workout, then chances are you're going to try and hold on to the barbell a little bit more. The weight of the barbell relative to your 1 rep max is going to make a pretty significant difference in whether or not you decide to do touch and go reps, and the set density. So with really dense sets, you might find that you feel more comfortable just doing singles. You might find that you have a plan that you want to break it up into. You're like, I'm going to do sets of 5 with 5 seconds of rest. It really just depends on you and your fitness level, your strength, and all of these things as well. You can see here I gave some example workouts. If we have AMRAP 10 with like 3 snatches at 135.95, some box jump overs and some calories of rowing, if this is based off of somebody who has a 225 or 155 1RM snatch, that's at 60% of your 1RM. But with only 3 reps like that, and you're coming off of the rowing machine, you might just be able to go touch and go there, right? If you look at the workout off to the right and up a little bit higher, you're still at 135.95. But if the workout's finishing with 30 snatches, chances are you're not going to want to hold on for 30 snatches. And if you look at the work that's coming before that, you've got 40 burpee box jump overs and 120 calories of rowing coming before that. Chances are by the time you get to that 30 snatches, you're just going to want to do singles, right? But if we lower the weight to 95 or 65, which is closer to like 40% of your 1 rep max, that might be an instance where you do want to hold on. You want to do sets of 5 or 6. And if you're really fit, maybe you're doing like sets of 10 or 15, right? That looks very similar to the wall walk row barbell workout that was in the open that one year, right? And so weight, duration of the workout, and density of the set are all going to be things that we have to consider when we're deciding whether or not we're going to do touch and go reps and implement barbell cycling, or if it's going to turn more into a repeatable singles situation. So I alluded to this earlier. Far away from competition, it doesn't make sense for us to do a ton of like really hard barbell cycling and battery work. That can be very fatiguing as a training tool. It is important that we do that. It can help you get tuned up when you're really close to competition. But when you're really far away from competition, it might not make sense to be training that way. And so really far away from competition, the biggest bang for your buck is just going to be working on getting stronger. It's not super important that you're like fully tuned up for barbell cycling if you don't have a competition for like 6 months, right? Like you can kind of leave that on the back burner, and increasing your overall 1RM strength in the snatch will pay off and make barbell cycling and the battery work feel easier once you start to fold it back in, right? Now you do need to practice that a little bit before you get to competition because it's a skill and it's something that we want to make sure that we're good at by the time we get to the competition. But in terms of training, especially far from a competition, it might not be the best use of your time. As you get a little bit closer to competition, so maybe I'm running an accumulation cycle. It's not super intense yet, but maybe I'm, 2 months out from a competition. I feel a little antsy. I want to make sure that I'm getting some barbell cycling in. We can put it in there in terms of practice, right? And so maybe we're not going to a super stressful situation. You can also use like battery work as a kind of like pseudo accessory piece at the end, and I'll show you examples of what that looks like. But in this instance, it's not like crush as hard as you can, right? We're getting exposed to it, but it's more in the context of quality than it is like stress. Okay. And then as you get really close to competition, then obviously it becomes necessary that you do some of this more fatiguing, stressful work. Okay. So here's example workouts, and these I pulled off of my Coach RX account that I've given to a variety of clients. You can see on the left there, when we're accumulating and we're far away from a competition, he's doing, squat clean singles at 185. There's some battery work there. He's doing some wall balls. He's kind of staying familiar with the sport, but really what that was like a leg accessory work, right? So it's some squatting reps at a tough weight, some easier squatting reps, and then hitting the quads again on the echo bike. Okay. And then he's rest walking in the time remaining, but he's probably got like a minute and 45 seconds of rest. So more than equal work rest there. He's only doing 4 sets of that. It's not a ton of volume. It's a good amount of volume, but it's more there for quality, and he's getting a good amount of recovery. The intention is on like good clean reps, right? When we look over on the other side, these competition prep workouts are a lot more intense, right? And so you can see like one is from Northern California Classic comp prep that I had one of my athletes do, and it's just burpees over the bar and then snatches at 185 pounds. 125 was what the girls would have done on that, right? And that is like a tough battery piece. You're getting 5 minutes in, snatching 185, 125. That's really challenging. Okay, it's hard to recover from. But where this was in the training, volume was a little bit lower. And the intention at this point is to prepare for competition, right? We're not expecting to do this and see an enormous amount of snatch gains, right? We're doing this because we want to get familiar with how that feels, because that could potentially show up, or something similar to that could show up in competition. You can see the quarterfinal simulation there. So that's something that one of my clients did before quarterfinals. Just shuttle run, bar muscle up, and then 5 clean and jerks at 245. So those were not touch and go clean and jerks. Those were quick singles. But understanding at the end of a tough, bout of work, what battery feels like. And granted, that's clean and jerk, but you can do the same thing with the snatch. And then here's a barbell cycle. I wanted to put a barbell cycling one in there. So for the barbell cycling, working on hang power snatches. This was a girls' workout. That would be 135 for the guys. Just working on 20 seconds of hang power snatches. Look, I like the hang power snatch because it kind of forces you to go unbroken and gets you some good practice with like turning the bar over at a high frequency. She was also needing to get better at burpees, so you can see there's a good amount of burpees in this workout. And then stipulating like, hey, I want you to do 6 unbroken clean and jerks, right? Because sometimes like you get tired, you're in this situation where you're doing this workout, you might opt to like be a little bit more efficient, maybe preserve a little bit of energy so you could potentially push harder on the burpees. It would have taken maybe a little bit longer, but maybe it could have paid off. But I wanted this athlete to practice going unbroken and getting some of that like tougher barbell cycling in. And so that's why that's in there. All right, so those are just examples of like what the snatch looks like, how you could apply stress to the snatch for the context of the sport. So to reiterate, anything that's like a max attempt, anything that is a heavy complex will likely just benefit from having a higher 1RM. If you want to increase your 1RM, if you're very strong and have poor technique, I go over some of the technical stuff in the previous video. If you are very technical and you need to raise your 1RM, chances are you just need to get stronger, right? Then we also have battery work where it pays to be stronger, but also there is some element of fitness and replenishing your CP battery. I gave examples of how you can train for that. And then barbell cycling is a skill in and of itself. And there's a kind of framework in there for how to push barbell cycling, how to stress it a little bit, and how to continue working on barbell cycling. So thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really helps me out. And then, I'll catch you guys in the next one.